Hello everyone. I'm the storyteller from the channel Whispered Tales and I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? At what time are you watching? Now, get comfortable and relax. The road was long and winding, a thin, pale ribbon laid across the vast emptiness of the world. Beneath the traveler's weary boots, the path stretched onward without end, twisting through a landscape where the trees leaned in as though whispering secrets to one another. Their blackened branches tangled overhead, forming a broken canopy that allowed only the thinnest strands of gray light to filter through. It was neither day nor night, neither dawn nor dusk. The sky above was colorless, suspended in a timeless haze, an eternal twilight where the sun was but a forgotten memory. The traveler, whose name was no longer of consequence, walked alone. Their footsteps were soft upon the cracked earth, each step muffled by the thick carpet of fallen leaves and forgotten dreams. Around them, the forest breathed. The wind moved like a sigh between the trees, cool and persistent, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and faded things long since lost to time. Hours passed. Or perhaps minutes. In this strange place, time no longer obeyed the rules it once did. The traveler could not tell whether they had been walking for days or mere moments. The forest remained unchanged, as though the trees themselves had grown weary of counting hours. Then, without warning, the road widened, opening onto a desolate hillside where the fog pooled like liquid silver. Beyond the fog, the traveler glimpsed something faint, buildings, perhaps. Silent and still. Hesitant yet drawn by some quiet, inexplicable pull, they continued on, their footsteps slow and steady, careful not to disturb the quiet that clung to this place like a veil. A signpost emerged from the mist, half buried in the overgrown weeds at the side of the road. Its letters, faded and cracked, were just barely legible, "Welcome to Vale Hollow." A quaint name for a place so utterly abandoned by light. As they passed the sign, the fog grew thicker, wrapping around them like a cold, damp shroud. Shapes began to take form in the murk, crooked rooftops, crumbling chimneys, shattered windows like dark, unblinking eyes. The village stood silent, frozen in a moment of forgotten history. Every house seemed untouched by life, as if the people who had once filled these streets had simply vanished, leaving their belongings behind to gather dust. Wooden carts sat abandoned in the streets, their wheels cracked and brittle. Shutters hung loosely from their hinges, creaking faintly in the wind, each grown a quiet lament for a time long past. The traveler paused before the first house. Its door hung open just a crack, swaying gently as if inviting them in, or warning them to stay away. A single lantern, its oil long since spent, dangled from a hook above the porch, swinging softly as though stirred by an unseen hand. A chill ran down the traveler's spine, but still they stepped forward, drawn by a curiosity deeper than fear. Inside, the air was thick and musty. Dust hung suspended like ghostly motes in the thin shafts of light that broke through the boarded windows. Furniture stood exactly where it must have been left years ago, a chair tilted askew, a teacup resting beside an open book whose pages had yellowed and curled. A clock on the mantelpiece caught the traveler's eye. Its hands were frozen at 3:33. An odd time to stop, the traveler thought. But even odder was the realization that every clock they would later encounter in Vale Hollow, in every house, every shop, and every tower, would be stopped at precisely the same hour. They left the house and wandered further into the village. The streets were empty, yet the traveler could not shake the feeling of being watched. Windows stared at them like hollow eyes. Shadows moved at the edge of their vision, disappearing the moment they turned to look. Sometimes, they thought they heard something more, the faintest whisper carried on the wind, a voice too distant to understand but close enough to chill the soul. The town square was wide and open, yet it, too, was abandoned. A great fountain stood in its center, dry and cracked, with moss creeping up its sides. Around it were benches and lamp posts, their paint peeling, their metal rusting under the weight of years without care. Here, in this lonely square, a single church bell rang out, once, then fell silent. But no one had struck it. The traveler stood still, heart beating slow and steady, like a distant drum. They did not run. Instead, they listened. The wind spoke in sighs and murmurs. Beneath its voice, something deeper stirred, a presence vast and ancient, slumbering beneath the stones of the town, waiting for some unknown moment to awaken. The traveler turned toward the church at the far end of the square. Its doors were tall and dark, carved with symbols whose meanings were long forgotten by living minds. The steeple rose into the fog, vanishing somewhere in the distance above. They stepped inside. The air was colder here, heavy with the scent of old wood and extinguished candles. Pews lined the aisle, covered in dust, as if waiting for a congregation that would never return. At the altar stood a book, its pages cracked and worn. The traveler approached and opened it slowly. The words within were faded, almost illegible, yet one phrase stood out among the lines of scripture and prayer: "He who listens long enough to the whispers will be known by them." A sudden gust of wind slammed the church doors shut behind them, plunging the space into shadow. But the traveler remained calm. There was something soothing in the quiet of this place, something strangely peaceful in surrendering to the unknown. Fear no longer held dominion here, only acceptance of what was, and what would come. They left the church as the first faint echoes of twilight bells rang out across the valley, their tone low and distant, as though coming from beneath the earth itself. By now, the fog had thickened into a blanket, obscuring the sky entirely. What little light remained was soft and silver, casting long, eerie shadows across the cobblestones. The traveler sought shelter in what once might have been an inn. Its sign hung crookedly above the door, the paint faded beyond recognition. Inside, the rooms were empty, yet the beds remained made, waiting for guests who would never arrive. They chose a small room at the end of the hall, where the walls bore faint scratches, as if someone long ago had tried to carve words into the wood before abandoning the effort. The traveler lay upon the bed, their eyes open to the cracked ceiling above. The silence stretched on, vast and uninterrupted, save for the occasional creak of settling wood and the faint whisper of the wind. They drifted somewhere between waking and sleep, caught in that strange space where dreams feel more real than memory. Outside, something moved along the cobblestone streets. A slow, measured tread, too deliberate to be the wind. It paused beneath the window, then continued on, its footsteps fading into the distance. The traveler felt no fear, only a curious calm, as though whatever walked those streets had always been there, and always would be. In that moment, they understood, this place was not meant to be escaped. It was meant to be endured. And perhaps, in some quiet way, it welcomed them. As their eyes drifted closed, the final thought that crossed their mind was a simple one: I have found the place where the world forgets. Morning never came. The traveler awoke in darkness, though whether it was night or simply the endless fog refusing to yield, they could not tell. The room around them was quiet, still as the grave, and yet there was the undeniable sense that something had been there, watching as they slept. Something patient. Something waiting. They rose from the worn mattress, boots meeting the creaking floorboards with gentle resolve. Dust motes spun in the cold air, illuminated faintly by the weak light seeping through the cracked shutters. With each breath, the traveler felt the weight of the town pressing down, as if the very walls carried memories too heavy to bear. They stepped outside. The streets remained empty, shrouded in mist, yet the town seemed somehow more awake. Windows that were once dark now flickered faintly, though no candle flame danced behind them. Doorways stood ajar, as though inviting the traveler to explore, or perhaps daring them to intrude. The first stop was a small general store, its wooden sign barely clinging to the post above the entrance. Inside, the shelves stood half-stocked, jars of preserves clouded with decay, cans rusted beyond recognition. A ledger lay open on the counter, its last entry dated nearly a century prior, its ink faded but still legible: last supply received, no contact since, may the hollow keep us safe. The words trailed off into a frantic scrawl, as though the writer had been interrupted mid-thought. As the traveler flipped through the ledger's brittle pages, a soft thump echoed from the back room. They froze, listening. There it was again, soft, irregular, like something shifting, stirring, breathing. But when they pushed open the back room door, there was nothing. Just shadows and dust, and a single cracked mirror resting against the far wall. In the reflection, they caught a glimpse of a figure, tall, still, watching from behind them. They turned quickly. No one. Only the whisper of wind slipping through broken window panes, carrying faint voices like distant echoes across water. Stay. Why did you leave us? It's not safe beyond. Were these the voices of those who once lived here, trapped in eternal dusk? Or were they simply the tricks of a tired mind, stretched thin by loneliness and the endless gray? The traveler could not tell. And perhaps, they no longer cared. Outside, the fog shifted and parted, revealing the remnants of a schoolhouse perched on the edge of the village. Its bell tower stood silent, leaning slightly to one side, as though weary from years of disuse. The traveler approached slowly, boots crunching over scattered leaves and broken glass. Inside, children's desks sat in neat rows, their surfaces scratched with forgotten initials and crude drawings. A faded chalkboard still bore the faint outlines of a lesson left unfinished, the final word trailing off as if the teacher had left mid-sentence. A small journal rested on the teacher's desk. The traveler opened it carefully, the brittle pages threatening to crumble at their touch. The children have been hearing them again, the journal read. Whispers from the forest at night. I thought it was only their imagination at first, but I heard it too. Last night, as I walked home alone, something called my name from the shadows. The final entry was little more than a scrawl. They say the hollow is hungry. The traveler sat for a moment in the stillness, letting the words settle over them like the dust that coated every surface of this forgotten place. For a fleeting moment, they imagined what life had been like before the silence fell over Vale Hollow, before the fog, before the whispers. Laughter echoing through the streets. Warm light spilling from windows. Footsteps running home before dark. But that life was gone. All that remained were shadows of memory, fragile and fading. With a slow breath, the traveler rose and stepped back into the fog-drenched streets. They wandered now without destination, guided only by intuition. Through alleys where ivy crept like veins across stone walls, past houses where curtains still hung limp in the broken windows, and down to the town square once more. At the center of the square, they noticed something they had missed before. A statue stood atop the dry fountain, weather-worn and crumbling. It depicted a figure cloaked in robes, face obscured, holding a lantern whose light had long since gone out. At the base of the statue, an inscription barely clung to legibility, "To those who remain when all others flee." The traveler traced the words with a gloved hand, feeling the cold stone beneath their fingers. There was a sadness here, deep and lingering. Not just fear, but regret. As if the town itself mourned those who had vanished. The church bell rang again. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then silence. The traveler turned and noticed something strange. A shadow standing at the far end of the square. Motionless. Watching. It did not move as they approached. It did not flee. But when the traveler reached the place where it had stood, there was nothing. Only the faint scent of smoke lingering in the air, and the soft, fading echo of footsteps retreating into the mist. As night, if it could be called night, settled once more, the traveler sought shelter again. This time, in what might have once been a library. Its shelves stood mostly empty, save for a few scattered volumes covered in dust and cobwebs. One book in particular caught their eye. It was bound in faded leather, its title long worn away. Inside, they found a series of journal entries written by many hands over many years, each voice blending into the next, a collective history of the town's slow descent into silence. We thought we could wait it out. We thought if we stayed quiet, it would pass by, leave us be. But it only grew louder. It only grew closer. There is no morning here. Only endless dusk. Only the hollow and its hunger. I see them in my dreams now. The figures in the fog. They watch from the tree lean, whispering things I cannot understand. Page after page, the words blurred together, a tapestry of despair woven from countless lives that had tried, and failed, to escape the valley's grasp. The traveler closed the book gently and sat in the stillness, listening. Outside the cracked windows, the fog thickened once more, swirling and shifting as if alive. And beneath the endless whispers, something larger moved. Something slow and ancient, slumbering beneath the town, waiting for its next visitor to listen too long. But the traveler felt no urge to run. Only a quiet resolve. Perhaps they had always belonged here. Rising once more, they left the library and wandered toward the outskirts of the village, where the houses gave way to wild overgrowth and the forest loomed like a living wall. A faint path, barely visible beneath the tangled vines and fallen branches, beckoned them onward. And so they stepped beyond the village limits, into the forest's waiting arms. Behind them, the bell rang a final time. And then, nothing but the wind. The trees rose tall and silent around them, their twisted limbs reaching like skeletal fingers toward the sky. The path wound deeper, narrowing until it was little more than a thread of earth beneath their feet. Here, the air grew colder. Thicker. Each breath carried the scent of moss, decayed leaves, and something faintly metallic beneath it all. The traveler paused beneath an ancient oak, its roots gnarled and tangled like grasping hands. Carved into its bark was a single word, crudely etched by some long-forgotten soul: stay. They rested beneath the tree for a time, feeling the forest breathe around them. The wind carried whispers too faint to understand, but still, they listened. Not every voice was cruel. Some spoke softly, as if offering comfort in the quiet. Rest now. You've come far enough. Sleep beneath our branches. The traveler's eyelids grew heavy, lulled by the cadence of the forest's voice. But sleep would not come, not fully. Instead, they drifted in and out of waking, caught in a place between worlds, where shadows danced and forgotten names echoed on the wind. In this twilight slumber, they dreamed of the village as it once was. Children laughing in the schoolyard. Bells ringing joyfully from the chapel tower. Markets bustling with voices and life. And then, the fog. Rolling in from the hills. Covering the fields. Filling the streets. Silencing the laughter, extinguishing the lights. When they awoke, the forest was darker still. The mist clung low to the ground, and somewhere ahead, the faint outline of a clearing emerged, a place where the trees gave way to something older, something stranger. The traveler rose and continued on, each step slow, deliberate, steady. Beyond the clearing lay the ruins, though they did not yet know it. But the forest knew. And it waited for them still. The path faded beneath the traveler's feet until it was no more than a memory. Roots tangled like veins beneath the thin blanket of mist, and brambles wove themselves into tangled knots, forming silent barriers that whispered when brushed aside. The forest deepened with every step, its branches arching overhead in solemn reverence, as if the trees themselves bore witness to the passage of another soul into their ancient heart. The air was thicker here, cooler, drenched in the scent of earth and distant rain. Each breath carried a subtle metallic tang, as though the very atmosphere remembered old blood spilled upon these roots long before the traveler's arrival. Time passed without measure. The traveler's thoughts wandered as they walked, drifting like fallen leaves upon a slow-moving stream. They recalled faces they could no longer name, voices that faded the harder they tried to grasp them. Their memories felt distant now, softened by the fog, worn smooth by the endless silence. And then, in the stillness, a distant sound. Not the wind, nor the creak of branches, but something else. A faint melody, brittle and hollow, like a music box playing far beneath the earth. The traveler paused, listening as the tune rose and fell on some invisible breeze, each note carrying a sadness too deep for words. Drawn forward by that lonely song, they followed its call. The trees thinned gradually, revealing a clearing bathed in dim, silver light. At its center stood the ruins of a chapel, half collapsed, its once proud spires reduced to jagged remnants reaching skyward like broken teeth. Moss and ivy consumed its stone walls, and shattered stained glass lay scattered across the ground like the fragments of forgotten dreams. Inside the chapel, a single music box rested upon an altar of cracked marble, its delicate gears somehow still turning, producing the faint melody that had guided the traveler here. They approached slowly, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon them, though no living creature stirred. The forest watched with breathless silence, waiting to see what they would do. With trembling fingers, the traveler lifted the music box's lid. Inside, a small porcelain figure spun in slow circles, its painted face cracked and worn, its dance both beautiful and sorrowful. Beneath the figurine, an inscription worn nearly smooth, for those who remember when all else is forgotten. The melody faltered, slowed, and finally wound down to silence. And in that silence, the whispers returned. Soft at first, like distant voices carried on a breeze. Who are you? Why have you come? Will you stay? The traveler spoke aloud, their voice thin and hoarse from disuse. I don't know. The forest answered not in words, but in the deep rustle of branches and the sigh of unseen winds. They left the chapel, leaving the music box open upon the altar, its silent melody lingering in the air like the ghost of a forgotten lullaby. The path beyond the clearing beckoned, winding downward now, as if descending into the very heart of the valley. Shadows grew denser here, curling at the edges of the fog like living things, watching, waiting, remembering. A bridge appeared ahead, its wooden planks slick with moss, spanning a narrow chasm from which no bottom could be seen. Beneath the bridge, only darkness stretched away into infinity. The traveler crossed without hesitation, their footsteps muffled by the dense air. Halfway across, the wind picked up, carrying with it the low hum of voices rising from below. Countless voices, layered atop one another in a chorus of longing and loss. Stay with us. Don't leave. It's so quiet when you're gone. But the traveler pressed onward, reaching the other side where the trees opened onto another forgotten place. A graveyard, ancient and vast, spread out before them. Stones leaned at odd angles, their inscriptions eroded by time. Some graves bore no names, only symbols whose meanings had been lost to the ages. Others were marked with simple phrases. She waited. He listened too long. They never left. In the center of the graveyard stood a towering monument, its surface cracked and worn. The statue atop it depicted a hooded figure holding a lantern, much like the one in the village square. But here, the lantern still glowed faintly, casting a pale, steady light over the forgotten dead. The traveler sat beneath the monument and rested, feeling the eyes of the countless graves upon them. Yet it was not an unwelcome feeling. There was peace in this place, strange as it seemed. Perhaps the dead no longer feared the hollow. Perhaps they had found a quiet kind of belonging in its endless dusk. After some time, the traveler rose and continued on, deeper into the valley. The forest shifted around them, the trees growing taller, their branches more tangled, their trunks twisted by centuries of silence. Here and there, remnants of other travelers lingered, an old boot left beside the path, a torn journal page fluttering against a tree, a rusted compass pointing nowhere. The traveler paused to read the journal page, the writing faded but legible in places. I thought I was alone, but I was wrong. There are others here, watching from the trees. Some speak, some only stare. They mean no harm, I think. They're waiting for me to listen. They pocketed the page and moved on, footsteps soft against the mossy earth. At last, they came upon a clearing unlike the others. At its center, a great stone well yawned open, its mouth dark and endless. Vines crept down its sides, and symbols were carved into its rim, ancient, worn beyond recognition. The traveler peered into the darkness below, seeing no reflection, no bottom, only shadow. And then, a voice. Clear, soft, and impossibly close. Do you wish to know? The traveler closed their eyes. Yes, they whispered. The wind fell still. The forest held its breath. And from the depths of the well, the whispers rose in a single, unified voice. Then listen. For a time that could not be measured, the traveler listened. They heard the history of Vale Hollow, the lives that had come and gone, the joys and sorrows, the laughter and the silence. They heard the voices of those who had walked these paths before, those who had stayed and those who had fled. They heard the loneliness of the hollow itself, a place not of cruelty, but of forgetting. A place that remembered so that others might forget. And in that listening, the traveler found something unexpected. Peace. A quiet understanding that they, too, were part of this story now. Neither trapped nor lost, but simply present. When the whispers faded, the forest exhaled, and the wind stirred once more. The travelers stepped back from the well and continued their journey, the fog parting gently before them. Beyond the clearing, the trees opened onto a hilltop where the valley stretched out below, silent, timeless, unchanging. They sat upon the hill and watched as the fog rolled across the fields, as the distant bell tower rang once more, as the shadows danced in the streets of the forgotten village. And in that endless twilight, they rested. Not waiting to leave, but waiting to listen again. The wind softened to a hush, and the traveler sat beneath the heavy sky, watching as the last traces of distant light faded into dusk once more. There was no sunrise in Vale Hollow, only this eternal twilight, neither night nor day, but something suspended in between. The world felt slower here. The passage of time stretched like fog over distant hills, wrapping the valley in stillness. And the traveler, who had once hurried from place to place, now moved only when the quiet within their heart said it was time. The forest waited for them still, and so they rose, their body light as mist, their steps barely stirring the fallen leaves beneath their feet. Deeper now, into the woods where the trees grew so closely that daylight, if there had ever been any, could not reach. There, beneath the gnarled branches, the traveler found a stairway of stone descending into the earth. No sign marked its presence. No lantern lit its way. Only the quiet hum of something waiting far below. With slow, steady breaths, they descended. Each step downward brought them closer to a silence so complete, it seemed to press against their thoughts like soft cloth. Downward still, where the roots of the forest wove themselves into the walls, and moisture dripped in steady rhythm from the stones. Downward, where echoes no longer returned, and only the traveler's heartbeat remained as company. At last, the stairs gave way to a vast cavern, stretching into darkness. A subterranean lake filled the hollow, still as glass, its surface reflecting the faint glow of luminous moss clinging to the walls. And there, in the heart of the lake, something stirred. It was not a creature, not as one might understand it. It was a presence, soft and vast, ancient and gentle. It filled the space not with menace, but with patience. The traveler stepped to the water's edge and knelt, feeling the cold breath of the cavern on their face. From the depths, a voice rose, not spoken aloud, but carried within, threading itself through the quiet places of the mind. It asked no questions. It offered no commands. It simply spoke. Fragments of forgotten stories, memories of laughter that had echoed through the village square, the quiet sorrow of those who had watched the fog roll in and understood what it meant. The voice spoke of longing, not to be feared, but to be known. And as the traveler listened, they felt something loosen inside them, a tightness they hadn't known they carried. Perhaps it was fear. Perhaps it was loneliness. Perhaps it was the endless need to leave, to escape, to run from the quiet places of the world. Here, there was no need to run. Here, they could rest. For a long time, they sat in stillness, the voice of the hollow weaving its stories through the cavern's gentle hush. And in that stillness, sleep stirred at the edges of their thoughts. Not sudden, not sharp, but slow and peaceful, like a tide drawing away from shore. They let their eyelids fall, and for the first time in what felt like years, or perhaps only moments, they rested. And as they drifted, the hollow continued its whispering lullaby, telling of seasons that passed unnoticed, of footsteps long faded from the forest floor, of lanterns left unlit in windows waiting for someone's return. The traveler did not dream of home, for home was no longer a place, but a quiet within themselves. A place where the fog was soft, and the voices gentle, and the night stretched on without fear. Time passed, though the traveler could not measure it. When they awoke, the cavern remained still. But something had changed. They no longer felt the need to wander. No longer felt the ache of unfinished journeys. They rose slowly, leaving the water's edge, and retraced their steps up the winding stair. The forest welcomed them like an old friend, its branches swaying softly in greeting. The path that had once twisted and vanished before them now opened gently, leading back toward the village. Vale Hollow awaited them, unchanged yet somehow different. In the square, the bell tower stood silent, its purpose fulfilled. Windows glowed faintly with warm light. Shadows no longer lingered in doorways but rested peacefully within the quiet homes. The traveler walked its streets one last time, listening to the hush between footsteps, the stillness between heartbeats. The hollow whispered one final time, "You listened. That is enough." And so the traveler found a place to rest, beneath the tall oaks at the village's edge. They lay down upon the soft earth, eyes closing as the fog wrapped them in gentle quiet. And in that moment, they became part of the hollow's endless story. Neither lost nor trapped. Simply, at rest. And as the fog rolled on, the hollow fell silent, waiting patiently for the next traveler who might come seeking peace. Waiting to whisper again. Waiting for someone to listen. The wind carried the story away, fading into the quiet dusk, where sleep waited like a gentle tide. And so, the story ends not with an answer, but with a breath. Soft. Quiet. Endless. Sleep now, traveler. The hollow will wait. It always waits. And it never truly says goodbye. Only good night. Beyond the village and the quiet woods, a new path opened where the fog thinned and silver-leaved trees stretched as far as the eye could see. The air was sweet here, though tinged with something bittersweet and ancient. The traveler, no longer rushing, stepped carefully among the roots and fallen fruit that littered the ground, each apple and pear overripe and soft beneath their boots. The orchard was silent, yet it felt alive. Leaves turned in the windless air as though stirred by unseen hands. Occasionally, a fruit would fall, striking the earth with a muffled thud, sending up small puffs of mist that drifted away like forgotten memories. The traveler paused beside one tree whose bark bore carvings, initials and names, dates and half-finished sentences, as though many had come here before. Running their fingers over the rough wood, they traced the story of someone who had waited beneath this very tree, long ago, for a return that never came. In the distance, the sound of a lullaby echoed faintly, as if sung by the wind itself. Its melody lulled the traveler deeper, guiding them along twisting rows of trees that all looked the same yet somehow different, as if the orchard rearranged itself while no one watched. Night deepened around them, though it never grew fully dark. Instead, a soft silvery glow emanated from the fruits, illuminating the path ahead in a ghostly light. Somewhere ahead, a clearing opened, and in its center sat a long-forgotten table, set for a feast that never began. Silver plates tarnished with age, cups half-filled with stale wine, and chairs pulled slightly askew as if guests had only just stepped away. The traveler sat at the table, feeling the weight of all those who had come before, their laughter faded, their voices silenced by time. The silence was not empty, it was full of waiting. And then, without warning, one of the silver goblets tipped over, spilling its contents onto the tablecloth. The wine spread slowly, forming the shape of an eye, watching, waiting, remembering. The traveler rose and continued, leaving the feast untouched, moving deeper into the orchard's heart where the trees grew ancient and strange. Here, branches intertwined like the fingers of sleeping giants, and the fog thickened until the world beyond a few steps was hidden completely. And in the midst of this endless orchard, they found a door. Freestanding, made of weathered oak, with no walls to hold it. The handle beckoned. With a steady hand, the traveler turned the handle and stepped through. And beyond the door, a new journey began. The traveler found themselves in a vast hall of books, where the air smelled of parchment, dust, and old ink. Shelves towered upward beyond sight, filled with volumes whose titles had faded into nothingness. A single lantern floated beside them, casting a warm, steady glow. Here, the only sound was the slow, deliberate turning of unseen pages. Somewhere deep within the stacks, something, or someone, read endlessly, preserving the forgotten dreams of those who had walked the hollow before. The traveler wandered between the shelves, fingers brushing against cracked spines and faded covers. Occasionally, a book would fall open to reveal a single sentence written in elegant script. She woke before the dawn, but found no morning waiting. He built a home in the fog, and lived there without fear. They whispered the truth to the darkness, and the darkness listened. Each story unfinished, waiting for someone to read it again. In the center of the library stood a great desk, upon which rested a single book larger than the rest. Its cover bore no title. As the traveler opened it, the pages turned themselves, revealing a story that seemed eerily familiar, a story of a traveler who had come to Vale Hollow, walked the silent streets, crossed the forgotten bridge, and descended into the depths. It was their story. And yet it was still being written. The final page remained blank. The lantern flickered, and a voice, distant yet clear, spoke from somewhere among the stacks, "Write your ending, or wander forever." But the traveler did not pick up the quill. Instead, they closed the book and continued walking, leaving their story unfinished, for perhaps some stories are meant never to end. The library faded behind them as the fog crept in once more, wrapping them in quiet. From the fading library, a stone path led downward once again, until the traveler reached the banks of a slow-moving river. Its waters were clear yet dark, reflecting stars that did not shine in the sky above. Along the water's edge, smooth stones were arranged in rows, each engraved with a single name. Some names the traveler recognized from the chapel, the graveyard, and the journal pages they'd found. Others were unknown, yet familiar in that strange, dreamlike way. The river sang a wordless song, and its current moved without ripples or waves, gliding in endless stillness. A small boat waited by the shore, its oars resting patiently. Without hesitation, the traveler stepped aboard and let the boat drift. The river carried them through groves of willow trees whose branches swept the water like soft fingers, brushing against the traveler as they passed. In the distance, voices began to hum in harmony, low, soothing, and infinite, a lullaby sung by those who had crossed before. Their song carried no sadness, only the quiet peace of acceptance. And so the traveler drifted, letting the river take them further still. To where the hollow faded into dreams. To where sleep, at last, could come. The boat drifted until it met the shore of a distant island, where a tall clock tower rose against the eternal dusk. Its face was cracked, its hands motionless, pointing to no particular hour. The chimes that once rang from its heights were silent, yet the air carried the faint vibration of their absence, a resonance of a melody lost long ago. The traveler stepped onto the worn cobblestones, their footsteps echoing in the empty street surrounding the tower's base. Here, shadows lingered without source, curling in doorways and window frames like sleeping cats. The tower's great wooden doors creaked open as the traveler approached, revealing a spiral staircase spiraling upward into darkness. With steady breath, they began their climb. Step after step, the air grew cooler, the silence deeper, until even the sound of their footsteps faded. On each landing, paintings hung crooked on the walls, portraits of faces half forgotten, each wearing an expression of something between longing and relief. Beneath some portraits, brass plaques bore single words: waited, listened, rested. At the highest floor, the traveler entered a room filled with broken clockwork. Gears and springs littered the floor, and among them stood a single figure cloaked in shadow. The figure spoke softly, its voice neither male nor female, young nor old. "You have wandered far, and now you must decide. Do you restart the clock, and begin the cycle anew? Or do you let it sleep, as all things must, in time?" The traveler stepped forward, placing a hand upon the clock's frozen face. They felt its quiet pulse, waiting for their choice. But they made no choice at all. Instead, they sat beside the clock and listened, to the stillness, to the wind outside, to the slow, steady beat of their own heart. And in that silence, they found their answer. They would not control time. They would simply be. The figure smiled, fading into the shadows, leaving the traveler alone but not lonely. As the traveler descended the tower, the clock's hands remained still, yet somehow, that was enough. The world outside welcomed them with the same gentle fog, the same whispering breeze. And onward they walked, the path unfolding once again before them, endless and quiet, like the hush before sleep. Beyond the clock tower, the traveler found a gentle slope leading down into a wide, open meadow. Here, the fog parted softly, revealing fields of pale grasses that swayed as if stirred by some unseen lullaby. Wildflowers, silver and ghostly, dotted the expanse, their petals folding closed as the traveler passed, like tiny hands retreating into sleep. The air smelled faintly of lavender and rain, and the sky above remained caught in endless twilight, not quite night, not quite dawn. A stillness pervaded the meadow, deeper and quieter than any they had known before. In the heart of the meadow stood a circle of stones. Worn smooth by countless winds and years, the stones formed a silent sanctuary, untouched by time. As the traveler stepped into the circle, the air changed. A faint echo began to rise, not from the world around them, but from within their own memories. They heard voices they had forgotten, laughter from a childhood long past, whispered goodbyes, songs hummed beneath a distant moon. None of these echoes were frightening. They were gentle, fragile things, returning for a final moment before fading back into rest. The traveler sat in the grass and listened, letting the echoes wash over them like a slow tide. They did not try to hold on to the voices, nor push them away. They simply listened, until even the echoes, content to be heard at last, grew quiet once more. A single white flower bloomed at the center of the circle, its petals slowly unfolding to reveal a tiny, pulsing light within. The traveler cupped it gently in their hands, feeling its warmth spread through their fingers and into their heart. The light did not speak. It did not ask, nor demand. It simply offered its presence, quiet, steady, eternal. When the traveler rose, the meadow greeted them with a gentle sigh, as if grateful for their company. The grasses bowed in the soft wind, and the wildflowers returned to their sleep. And onward the traveler walked, leaving the echoes to their quiet rest, carrying the small light with them as they continued through the hollow, where the story stretched onward without end, like the slow rhythm of a dream. As the traveler departed the peaceful meadow, the path narrowed into a rocky descent that wound between steep cliffs. Soon, the earth opened into a jagged mouth, a cavern entrance hidden by layers of moss and tangled roots. The traveler paused, feeling the cool breath of the earth exhale from within. Stepping inside, darkness embraced them, complete and silent at first, until faint whispers began to stir. The whispers came not from a single voice, but from countless murmurs, overlapping and weaving together into a quiet symphony. They spoke in forgotten languages, their meaning lost but their tone clear. This was a place of secrets. The traveler lit a lantern, its glow barely piercing the thick shadows. Along the cavern walls, handprints and drawings emerged, stories etched by those who had passed through long before. They showed travelers much like them, some smiling, others weeping, all moving deeper into the earth. The path twisted and forked in countless directions, but somehow the traveler knew which way to go, guided by a pull deep within their chest. As they walked, the whispers grew softer, more welcoming. They spoke not of fear but of remembrance, of trials faced and lessons learned. In one chamber, a pool of still water reflected not the traveler's face but images from their past, moments of kindness, sorrow, and wonder. They watched in quiet reflection, neither longing for nor fleeing from what they saw. Just watching. Just remembering. Further still, the cavern opened into a vast hall filled with crystals that hummed gently, casting reflections across the walls like stars scattered through night. Here, the whispers faded into a deep, peaceful hush. At the cavern's farthest point stood a narrow passage, beyond which the faintest light flickered. Without hesitation, the traveler stepped through, leaving the cavern's stories behind, carrying only their own. The light welcomed them back to the surface, where the night sky stretched vast and endless overhead. The hollow was quiet once more, but the journey was far from over. And onward they walked, into the waiting dark. The travelers soon found themselves following a trail of colorful remnants, fragments of ribbon, scraps of faded banners, and broken carnival masks tangled in the brambles. They emerged into a clearing where a long-abandoned carnival stood beneath the pale moonlight. Rusted rides loomed like sleeping giants, their metal frames groaning softly in the breeze. Tattered tents sagged, their once bright stripes faded into muted shadows. Strings of paper lanterns swung gently overhead, casting a wavering glow that illuminated forgotten stalls and crooked game booths. Somewhere in the distance, the faint melody of a calliope played, slightly out of tune, as if the wind itself had remembered a song no one else did. The traveler wandered past a carousel frozen in mid-spin, its painted horses caught mid-gallop. Beneath the cracked paint, the figures seemed almost alive, their glassy eyes watching as the traveler passed by. A fortune-teller's booth stood at the far edge of the carnival. Its curtains parted as the traveler approached, revealing a dusty crystal orb resting atop a velvet cloth. Without a word, the orb began to glow, casting swirling images into the air, visions of paths not taken, choices not yet made, and futures that shifted like smoke. The voice of the fortune-teller, unseen, spoke softly, "All journeys circle back in time. Even yours." The traveler left the booth, the words lingering in their mind like the fading scent of autumn leaves. In the center of the carnival grounds stood a grand tent, its entrance yawning wide and inviting. The travelers stepped inside and found themselves in a ring of shadows and light. Spectral figures performed silent acts, tightrope walkers suspended in still air, jugglers frozen mid-toss, acrobats forever poised to leap. Their audience, rows of empty seats, waited silently for laughter that would never come. The traveler bowed in respect, acknowledging the performer's eternal vigil, then exited the tent. As they left the carnival behind, the distant calliope tune faded into quiet, and the fog reclaimed the clearing. And so, with the stars above guiding them onward, the traveler continued their endless walk through the hollow, where each step carried them deeper into the quiet unknown. After leaving the carnival behind, the traveler came upon a narrow lane lined with glowing lanterns, each swinging softly in the cool night breeze. The light they cast was warm and steady, unlike any flicker or flame the traveler had seen before. As they walked beneath the lanterns, a sense of quiet comfort settled over them, as if the lights themselves were guiding the way home. Each lantern seemed to hold a memory, a whisper of a life once lived or a dream long since faded. The traveler paused to look closely, seeing flickering scenes inside the glass, moments of laughter shared between friends, quiet sunsets watched in companionable silence, the gentle touch of a hand given without words. The path curved gently upward, leading to a small hill where the traveler found a bench bathed in soft lantern light. Sitting down, they let their breath slow, their heartbeats soften, and for the first time in what felt like forever, they allowed themselves to simply be. The whispers in the air softened to a hush, and the mist around the hollow seemed to settle like a soft blanket. The traveler closed their eyes, cradling the light of the lanterns in their heart, and felt the endless journey ease into a calm, gentle sleep. The traveler remained seated on the bench, the soft glow of the lanterns warming the cool night air around them. Slowly, the shadows began to thin, and the fog lifted just enough to reveal the faintest blush of dawn on the horizon. It was not a bright or hurried sunrise but a delicate veil of light, like the first breath of a new day whispered gently into existence. As the colors of the dawn unfolded, the traveler felt the weight of the journey lighten. The hollow, once a realm of whispers and shadows, seemed to breathe with a newfound softness, as if inviting the traveler to rest at last. Around them, the grasses swayed quietly, and the distant call of a waking bird echoed softly. The traveler watched as the last stars faded, the sky turning from midnight blue to pale lavender, and then to the tender pink of morning. There was no fear here. No rush. Only the slow, steady pulse of life returning, and the promise that all journeys, no matter how winding or long, lead to moments like this, quiet, full of peace, and just enough light to dream by. With a final deep breath, the traveler rose and turned toward the path home. The hollow stretched out before them, serene and endless, a gentle lullaby for the wandering soul. The traveler walked slowly now, each step soft and unhurried, as if moving through a dream woven from the quiet threads of night and dawn. The path beneath their feet seemed to glow faintly, guiding them not to a place, but to a feeling, the gentle warmth of belonging, the calm that comes when wandering ends. The hollow behind them whispered a farewell carried on the breeze, a murmur of gratitude for the traveler's presence and patience. The mists curled gently around their ankles, not to bind but to embrace, like a soft shawl wrapping the soul in quiet comfort. Ahead, a light shone, not bright or demanding, but steady and welcoming. It was the light of home, though it existed not in a building or a room, but within the traveler's own heart. A place where shadows were gentle, and silence was a friend. With a final glance back at the fading hollow, the traveler smiled softly, knowing the journey would live on in the quiet corners of memory, a whisper beneath dreams, a story told between breaths. And as the first true rays of morning touched the earth, the traveler closed their eyes and rested, finally, peacefully, deeply asleep.